Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Believe in Ole Miss podcast. Brad Logan alongside Coach Kemit Davis. Coach, thanks very much for joining us. I know it's been a really big basketball season for you. You got a lot of work early on with the SEC Network Plus. I know you're excited about your broadcasting career.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Chris came to me a couple times, and Chris and I, been friends for a while, and he's been great since I've left Ole Miss, and I think that's what good coaches do. I hope I did the same thing for AK, and guys that you respect. So Chris asked me to do it, and I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting back in the gym, watching their staff and team prepare, and you could tell then if they stayed healthy they're on to something really good, and I think they're probably played their best basketball the other night.
There's no doubt. And we'll talk about Ole Miss in just a moment. I want to stay along the lines of being behind the microphone versus being on the sideline calling the plays. Someone that really comes to my mind is Coach Richard Williams for Mississippi State. He joins Neil Price on the MSU Radio Network. And Coach Williams is as good as anybody when it comes to breaking down a game. It's always fun to listen to a former coach. And what did you take from the sideline to, I guess you'd say, the television booth, so to speak? And what were some things you wanted to add to the broadcast when you were a part of that?
Well, I think the one thing that you talk about, not called guys who've done this for a long time on a national level, just to get their thoughts. You want to talk and explain the game, but you don't want to get too technical and talk above people. Like if I was to get with a group of financial guys and they got out of layman's terms and started talking above my head, I'd kind of lose, exactly what they were talking about. So trying to keep it simple, but bring it to them in a good way. Point out a lot of the positive things that are happening in the game. Hopefully, bring a practice perspective into the game. What teams are trying to get accomplished, and on both sides of it. And I thought what the broadcast did in the non-conference is they featured also the opposing teams. Sometimes, not trying to just be a homer network, but trying to be a group that to feature good players from the other teams, also for Ole Miss. But then at the same time, really talk about the positive things and what fans should expect from the Ole Miss team as it went forward, especially kind of now into February and March.
I know I exchanged communication with you and Jake. You guys were a great team this year. I know a lot of Ole Miss fans have been very complimentary of your work. Wish you the best of luck. I know you're excited about your career in television, so I know folks are excited about that. Coach, the SEC season, we talked a little bit in pre-production here. As good as you've seen, I know you, a former player at Mississippi State, your dad, a former coach. You coached in the league, you coached in the Sun Belt. But you look at the SEC as a whole, Coach. I don't know if I've ever seen it this talented in my lifetime.
Yeah, the first time I really got indoctrinated to it, it'll show my years, Brad. Dad went as an assistant to Mississippi State in 1966. So really, I don't know if anybody's really followed it much closer than I have, from a coach's son to playing, not a very good player, but played in the SEC, was a coach in the SEC, and then was at LSU, and then following all these years, I've never seen it this deep. Now, has there been unbelievable teams that can win a national championship? No question. But I think you go into the last month of the season, there's 14 teams still in play for the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's a lot. And when you go back and you start talking about net rankings of all the teams right now, and it's hard to find a bad loss. I hate to say it, but maybe South Carolina, maybe LSU, who's kind of following some hard times right now, would be considered these teams that are chasing NCAA tournament bids, bad losses. But there's just so many quad one opportunities still left for all these teams in the last month.
You look at the game last night, Coach. I turn your attention to the Arkansas Razorbacks, a team that lost to LSU on the road a couple of weeks ago. Now they've spurned off two losses against Kentucky, and of course a big win last night over the Texas Longhorns. It feels like Arkansas, along with a couple of other teams, are kind of finding their legs a little bit. I thought Mississippi State's kind of been up and down a little bit. Tennessee's kind of been up and down a little bit. Ole Miss has been kind of hot here as of late. But the Arkansas Razorback, I want to start with them because of all of the stuff and the pomp and circumstance with John Calipari coming over from Kentucky. But he's kind of feeling some things out, and I really like his team. Thiero had a big game last night. He's kind of feeling his way, and now all of a sudden they're not on the bubble, Coach, but they're right next to the bubble, and they've only got, two, three conference wins.
Yeah, he took his team from Kentucky, the players, and then Boogie Flam was the most celebrated. But I'm telling you, the guys who hit in the portal, and some I know the portal is analytics and all that, but sometimes you have to have some luck involved in the portal guys. John L. Davis was the number one ranked portal guy in nearly every category. And just to date, until like the last week, he's been a real big disappointment. I mean, you think about that, and all of a sudden now he's found his legs and he's playing his best basketball the last three games. Brad, you follow it as good as anybody. Last year, I thought Jonas Adu was the second best big guy in the SEC behind Broom, probably the most improved player in the league. He had a few nicks and bruises, but I mean, he's not even playing. Brazil, who was this guy that everybody kept waiting. We all saw him and coached against him when he was a freshman at Missouri, 6'9". All those guys have had disappointing years, and now all of a sudden, Cal's just put a dude on the bench, played him 6 to 8 minutes. John L. Davis is now playing like advertised. Boogie Flan, think about that, will be a lottery pick. He's out for the year. But now, Knox and those guys that have played from Kentucky and followed them now are playing great basketball, and they've got a lot of work to do, but they've got some opportunities in front of them.
Yeah, they've got Alabama coming up on Saturday, and Bud Walton Arena will be absolutely jumping for the first time of the year. They've got an opportunity to make some noise. Coach, I want to ask you, you've been on both sides of the ledger, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. But I want to take you back to Kentucky just for a moment. Mark Pope was brought in to follow Cal. Always hard to follow someone that won a national championship, whether or not they wanted Cal to leave or whether or not he wanted to leave. Things were going well. They had a huge win over Mississippi State, and then they've had tough, tough losses. Number one, they lost to Arkansas at home with Cal coming back. But, Coach, I want to ask you, when they, being Kentucky, went on the road and lost to Ole Miss, did that loss hurt Kentucky more or help Ole Miss more that game the other night in Oxford?
You're on the road against the top 25 teams. So I don't think the loss hurts them at all. Now, but the difference between Ole Miss and Kentucky, it is Kentucky. I mean, there's
Right.
no other place like Kentucky. I just thought that, obviously they've got an injury to Butler, but the beauty of trying to play without, a key guy for certain periods of time and try to keep winning. Uh, Kentucky right now is just struggling mightily, just trying to guard. I mean, even the games they've won, I mean, they had to score in the 90s. They lost to Alabama, I think, gave up 100. Ole Miss was just so efficient, as it's documented the other night against Kentucky offensively. Uh, but who would ever thought, Brad? I mean, it's amazing. Travis Perry was a kid that we recruited, at Kentucky, and Travis called me the other day. We were just talking, and I said, Travis, who would ever thought that, the last box scores 2 or 3 games ago, you're the only freshman that would play for Kentucky. It's just all transfers. And he's done a really good job. But if they don't get their defense fixed, Brad, I mean, it's going to be hard for those guys to win games going on down the stretch.
It feels like, by the way, Kentucky, the team we're talking about, 15-7, 4-5 in the conference. That's how deep the SEC is, which is just mind-boggling numbers. There's one team, coach, that's high atop, and that's Bruce Pearl. I know you know Coach Pearl very well. They're the top-ranked team in the country, the top-ranked team in the SEC, 21-1, and in a season where it's been incredible in the SEC, they've not lost a conference game. They're fantastic. And Ole Miss gave Auburn a run for their money, but Broome was just too much. What have you liked about Pearl's team? And obviously, it appears to be a team that can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. But what are you kind of seeing out of the Auburn Tigers? And if there's anything, is there kind of anything that they have any type of challenging thing they're going to have to deal with? But right now, it looks like it's all orange and blue for Auburn.
Brad, and I really did. I thought Ole Miss uh, played one of their very best games of the year against Auburn. I thought Auburn played. I mean, they have such a confidence level. They played in that game just like they weren't going to lose. And Ole Miss just kept going at them and kept making runs. And those guys just made big shot after big shot. I mean, obviously, Broome right now, he and Cooper Flag, two best players uh, in the country. They're really old. They've got guys who've been there before. And you forget about, Baker Mazzario. And if he doesn't have his little outburst in the Yale game last year, who knows what kind of run they'd made in the tournament. I think the biggest thing going forward, Brad, I equated like we just celebrated our LSU team 2000. Well, why do you talk about that, Kermit? Because 25 years ago, at this particular time in the year, we were the best team in college basketball. There was no question. I mean, we just were beating people unmercifully. And we won at the end, but we weren't playing our best basketball. Does that make sense? I mean, so if the NCAA tournament was starting right now, Bruce wished the tournament started right now. And probably Shire does at Duke because they're playing their best. But kicking on all cylinders, making shots, staying healthy, all those things is going to be the biggest thing for Auburn down the stretch. But I mean, he's got depth, he's got size. Think about how they're playing, Brad. I mean, they're playing two traditional old school five men. I mean, Broom is a four, but he's really a five. And Cardwell, who's been there for 100 years, he's a five. And so they're playing really two bigs at the same time, and they're just got balance, but they shot make. I mean, Kelly and Pettiford, who we recruited here at Ole Miss, is a lefty. He's going to be a lottery pick coming off the bench. So they've got a great, great mixture of bigs and perimeter players.
When you look at Bruce Pearl and his success is documented with Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Of course, he goes to Tennessee and just lights the world on fire. And then things happen, ends up at Auburn, now has them as a top ranked team in the country. And honestly, Coach, you look at the Auburn program, they were not relevant before Bruce got there until Cliff Ellis, maybe. Is that fair to say? I mean, unless I'm missing a coach here or there, he's brought relevance to a program that is a football school. That is not easy to do. You know all that too well in a program that really puts a lot of emphasis in football. So, in your opinion, what makes Bruce so good? Because he's one of the best coaches in the country.
Yeah, he does it kind of on all the levels. I mean, obviously, number one, they're fantastic recruiters. Because when I was at middle, one of my last years at middle, we played Bruce's first team at Auburn and beat them. I think it was in Bridgestone in Nashville, and he was trying to piece it together. And then all of a sudden, after a couple of years, he really got his footing recruiting wise. So he's attracted great, great talent, NBA talent. Probably the most underrated thing about Bruce, he's one of the very best coaches. I mean, I've coached against him for a ton of years, and he just X and O's, understanding, uh, value of the team, of where shots could come from. And then number three, he's probably the best promoter in college basketball. He did it at Tennessee. He's done it everywhere he's been. He really does. He has a great way about what's really I've admired about Bruce, and not to get political, but he's the only coach in college basketball that can get political. I mean, he can get political. I mean, and recruit and then get political. And he plays to fan bases. He can play to recruiting. He can put it all together. And he is almost like a Barnum and Bailey circus ringmaster showman type guy. And it works because you think about it, he was a guy that they couldn't fill the Auburn arena at all, to now maybe besides Kentucky, they travel better than maybe almost any basketball team in the country right now. Their fans do.
Coach, Alabama's kind of on an island on its own. Obviously, Ole Miss beat them in Tuscaloosa. I think it's fair to say that a Coach Nate Oates would like to have that game back. I don't know that Alabama played its best game, but they're obviously just right there under Auburn. There is some separation. After that, Coach, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of teams in the middle. I want to name off a couple of teams and let me know some teams that kind of jump out at you who you think could make a run down the stretch. Missouri, Florida, A&M, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Kentucky. Who are some teams out of that group that kind of jump out at you that is a team that could get hot because we've got one of the craziest SEC tournaments on tap in Nashville coming in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, to get back to the Ole Miss win at Alabama, I think that's the best win of any SEC team this year. I mean, they were top five in the country, and I mean, people can say Alabama didn't play well. Ole Miss had an awful lot to do with that. They guarded at a high level. Dia was the best big man in the SEC for about a week. Now he played a lot better against Kentucky, so that wasn't a fluke. And Ole Miss is capable of doing that because just with the other night, they can guard and they ball protect. And when they shot make like the other night, they're one of those teams that can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. I think right now, if I had to rank the top three teams, I love Florida. I think their guards, Clayton was hurt, but Clayton, Elijah Martin, who's a Mississippi, we all screwed up on him, at North Pike High School in Macomb, Mississippi, that went to FAU, and then their transfer from Belmont. I mean, they've got three legitimate guards that play as good as anybody. and Condon may be one of the most underrated bigs. So I love Florida's chances to make runs. Obviously, Tennessee, when they shot make and they're healthy, are really good. Chaz Lanier is one of the greatest stories in college basketball, almost like Connect. I mean, think about that, Brad. I mean, you go back, okay, he's from Nashville. So everybody in the SEC, we all missed on him. Okay, he goes to North Florida. He averages one a game. Sophomore year, averages two a game. His junior averages four a game. And then he averages like 17. And then he comes to Tennessee and, he may be in the first team all SEC. So, uh, there's a lot of teams that can make runs, and outside of Auburn and Alabama, and I really believe this. I think Ole Miss is definitely one of them.
Let's take a look at Mississippi State just for a moment. I think what Chris Jans has done in Starkville has kind of turned that program on its head, doing really well. Josh Hubbard's kind of been up and down, Murphy down low. Coach, you go back. I know you looked at that Alabama game and looked at that tape, the Alabama Mississippi State game, and they were just right there in Starkville. Miss a layup, had an opportunity to win that game. I think, although Chris didn't say that, I think they allowed Alabama to beat them twice when Missouri went down and really beat Mississippi State badly in the hump. What's it going to take for Mississippi State to kind of get back on track? Because I think if that team is clicking, they're one of the better teams in the Southeastern Conference.
One guy, Riley Kugel. When he plays good, their team plays good. He's been up and down at Florida. Was supposed to be a first round pick, and then he came off the bench, didn't work out at Florida, went to Kansas, stayed there for a summer, didn't work out, went to Mississippi State. Their best game of the year is probably their win at Memphis. Kugel played like a lottery pick. When he plays, their team plays. I mean, Hubbard's obviously, they can say he's had a down year, but he's still averaging about 18 a game. Keyshawn Murphy's almost like Jonas Adu, maybe the most improved player in the league. Moot Matthews is one of the best glue guys in college basketball. But there's one guy. I mean, if I guarantee if you ask Chris James behind closed doors, I hadn't talked to Chris about it, but if Riley Kugel plays, their team is an elite team. The biggest thing about in the SEC is try, like you just said, Brad, is trying to get one loss not to go to two losses. I think there's only been two teams in the SEC that hadn't had back-to-back losses in the SEC. Obviously, Auburn and Alabama. That's hard to do. But like Chris's team at Ole Miss, or what Chris Jansen's team is going through right now, I mean, when you get on these streaks, and you can easily have them, lose three out of four, is being able to redirect your team and get them back going. And because it's just going to happen with the depth of the league. You can go on these three out of four losing and still not be playing bad basketball.
Let's talk about Ole Miss for a moment. You've seen them play a lot in person early on too. Um, a couple of players that kind of jump out to you, Coach. You look at this team and what they've been able to do, and you talked about the game against Alabama. And when they beat Alabama on the road, I felt like that's almost good enough for two wins in the conference. Now, we
Yeah.
can talk about quad one and all of that. But I think the confidence of that, I think Selection Sunday that's going to play into that. Avoid the landmine. Obviously, you want to do that. That happens on Saturday when Ole Miss plays LSU. But if you can win your home games, and Chris talks about it all the time, you've heard him say it's an 18 round fight, and he's really lived by that game by game. But this team's been really good about not getting too high, not getting too low, trying to play within itself. We saw last night or the night before against Kentucky, got a huge lead, 27 points. Kentucky kind of chipped back, but I thought it was, the way that Chris kind of honed in his team. We haven't seen Ole Miss do that this year, kind of get the big lead and kind of give it away. But Ole Miss has done a lot of really good things, avoiding that landmine. And I think they're putting themselves in pretty good position right now.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, their strength of schedule is good. They've got six quad wins right now. I think they're 6-6 and quad one wins. Um, I just they haven't had any really bad losses, and even two of the four losses, I thought they played good. I thought they played good at State. I thought they played good against Alabama. I thought they had really good stretches and played good at Missouri. I mean, they just got beat by three really good teams. I think Sean Padula, if I was to have a first team All SEC team, he's on it. I think he may be the most important guy to his team than anybody in the league. I mean, Auburn has shown that they can even win without Broom, and I'm not saying taking anything away from Broom, but I think Sean Padula of what he does. I mean, he's second in the league in steals. He's averaging almost 16 a game the way he shoots it. He's underrated. I was talking to an NBA scout the other day, and I compared him to a guy named Pritchard from Oregon, who now plays with the Celtics. And I said, "What's the difference?" I'm just trying to compare it, give a comparison to him. He said, "Good comparison." So I don't know where he ends up, but I just think right now he's playing as good as anybody. And they need Dia to be a monster down the stretch. He's got to be. And I think Jamin Brakefield right now is playing as good as he's ever played in the SEC. So they've got good balance, good depth, stay healthy. They can make a good run down the stretch.
I think you may have just answered the question that I had next for you, Coach. If I come to you sometime in April and say it was a heck of a year for Ole Miss, they made it all the way to the Sweet 16, maybe to the Elite Eight. What's going to have to happen for Ole Miss to do that, in your opinion?
Well, they're just they're different defensively because of schemes, how they play, all the hard switching, the doubling from the post, from the baseline, keeping the ball on the side. So it's a different matchup. And in the NCAA tournament and the SEC tournament, not quite so much because everybody's seen them. But in the NCAA tournament, they're fortunate enough to win a first round game that Thursday to Saturday or Friday, Sunday. That's a quick preparation for Ole Miss's team. Uh, they're not a great rebounding team. They're just trying to almost stay in the ball game, rebounding. But it's going to be if they can shot make. If they're going to guard if they can shot make. And I mean, just Matt Morrell and some different guys just shot make, keep with the ball security. Then surely they could get beat in the first round of the NCAA tournament, or they could definitely be a second weekend team.
Coach, taking a look at the SEC as a whole, Joe Lunardi has 13 teams in the NCAA tournament right now, and I don't know if that includes Arkansas, depending on what the Razorbacks can do. You look at the SEC as a whole, and we kind of coming back around to where we were at the beginning of the interview here. The SEC is just crazy, and so many ranked teams, so many teams that if 13 teams get into the NCAA tournament, the record is 12 set by the Big Ten, which would be just astronomical. If you could put a Final Four together, which one of these SEC teams, or maybe a handful, could make the Elite Eight, could make a run into the Final Four? What team? Obviously Auburn, but what are some teams you're kind of looking at that could make a run in the NCAA tournament?
Well, I mean, Auburn, Alabama, you look at it, Tennessee's built, Florida's built. Uh, I'm serious. I think, Ole Miss is built. I think Missouri is built that they could be a second weekend Elite Eight type team. I just don't think Kentucky guard's good enough to do it. They'd have to go on an unbelievable streak, maybe get Lamont Butler totally healthy. So I really think there's 6 or 7 teams that can make a deep second weekend run in the tournament. Right now I think there's really 9 teams that are probably locks, Brad, to go. Uh, and I know because of the SEC, the biggest thing now, like Mississippi State has made the NCAA tournament last 2 years with a losing record, 8-10 and 8-10. Usually that magic number was 10. Like our first year's team 10, our third year team was 10 and didn't get in. But now I think because of the value of the league, you make it even an Arkansas team or one team, make it win 7. But I really think 8 for those teams is probably the magic number. And like I said, I think the only 2 that are out, not in play, is LSU and South Carolina.
One final question today for you, Coach, and not many people can answer this question, but you can. Not everybody has had a lot of experience in the NCAA tournament. You have. I'd love for you to reflect either as a player, an assistant coach, a head coach. What are some teams, or really, what is your favorite team that you put into the NCAA tournament, regardless of your classification? And what do you reflect upon that? And what do you think? What do you think positively on during your experience in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I was a part of 4 different teams going to the tournament. One as an assistant at LSU, and then took 3 different teams to the NCAA tournament: Idaho, Middle Tennessee, and Ole Miss. Being a 28-year-old head coach at Idaho, and they don't go very much, hadn't been back since we left. It's been 35 years. The first year that we won at Boise State, it was really good, and then we played Vegas in the first round. It was Tarkanian's team, and I mean we were good. We played them right to the end. Got beat about 9 or 10. So the very first one is really something special. Obviously, the Middle Tennessee team and winning the tournament and upsetting Michigan State. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Chris and I've talked about that same tournament, Little Rock. He was at Little Rock. They upset Purdue, and so it's kind of that the mid-major teams. And then, they all each have their own value. Then the one here at Ole Miss, Terrence Davis had never been to an NCAA tournament, and to get TD to an NCAA tournament at Ole Miss, and we didn't play very well at all in the NCAA tournament, but to get Ole Miss back to the tournament was a big thing for us. So they all have unique experiences, and to kind of be a part of four different schools to go, Brad. I mean, you can reflect and look back and gosh, when your name is called, I don't even care when you know your name is going to be called. It is the most unbelievable feeling, and there's going to be a lot of those good feelings in the SEC this year.
Before we go, one more quick thing, Coach. You made mention of that LSU team back in 2000. That was a really good basketball team. What do you think back fondly about that team, and what are some players that maybe you may still stay in contact with? And I know Coach John Brady was a part of that class and or part of that team, and that was a fun team to watch.
Yeah, Brad, and we said it the other night. We all had a chance just to talk to our group, and everybody talked about it, and just to be able to do it with two great friends. I mean, John Brady was my dad's GA at Mississippi State. I've known John for a long time. Butch Pierre and I were teammates at Mississippi State, and Butch was an assistant coach, did an unbelievable job of recruiting on that team. But LSU, to remember it, and I love Dale Brown, but they were coming off NCAA probation. We were limited scholarships, like had 8 scholarships, and took it over when we finished last a couple years, and then got it to that caliber. And then John eventually took a team to the Final Four. I mean, Stromile Swift, who was second player picked in the draft, nobody beat Georgetown in recruiting, and John Thompson, and we beat him to come to LSU. Ronald Dupree, who's a Biloxi native, top 10. Now he's the director of scouting with the Milwaukee Bucks. You can go on and on and on. Jabari Smith, who's junior now, is with the Rockets and who played at Auburn, but was second round pick with the Kings. So Brandon Landry, think about this story. Brandon Landry, who started walk-ons, has over 100 walk-ons. He was a walk-on on our team, and on these charter flights, Brad, he was drawing up his logo for walk-ons. We said, "Come on, Landry, just you're going to raise crawfish like your dad." And just what he's done with that. So there's a lot of successful guys on that team, and it was sure fun to get together back in Baton Rouge this past weekend.
It's going to be a blast watching this stretch run to the SEC, Coach. I don't know that I've enjoyed just being a fan watching the SEC like I have this year, and appreciate you coming on. It's been fantastic. Wish you nothing but the best. I know you're excited about your future in the world of television and broadcasting, and we could not be more prouder for you. Thanks, Coach.
Well, Brad, I'm gonna say this too. You do an unbelievable job. You did it when you covered Ole Miss with me. You do it now. You have a great perspective, good insight. So thanks for all the great work you do in the media as well.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Brad.